Yeah, we're wearing the same time. Someone sent from.
Dit is de bedoeling, ja? Ja, doe maar. Katarina, alles goed? No. You want finish? Are they finished?
So, good morning everybody. I hope you enjoy this nice morning. Some coffees, a bit of tired after today's journey. So I'm delighted to welcome you to Barclays Technology Center in Lithuania. For us it's a big pleasure to host this 1.5 hour event. I'm delighted what the topics of economy will be discussed, because I do represent a company who has believed in the Lithuanian potential, and we have established our center here. When we look into the important benchmarks the Barclays is reaching this week actually. So we are going to be a 1,000 employee company. So the one lucky one is on the way now to a job. So we're looking forward for that. And then during probably a very short in history, so during the 4 years, we have established about 1,000 value-added jobs in this company. And basically in this country, which is contributing over 1 million liters, basically in salaries and in taxes, to the state. And this is a good example of the potential of this part of Europe. So welcome to the Barclays. For those who would like to have a small journey after that, so bear with me, so we can take a look to the floors. You can take a look if you have got some time. So with that, I will pass over to the moderator of our session, Edmundas.
Thanks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here in our conference. Today, in 1 hour and 30 minutes, we'll have a good opportunity to hear the thoughts and ideas of the most prominent Lithuanian businessmen and financial experts. And the panel, which I'm going to introduce in a minute, by my opinion, is probably the best panel you can get in Lithuania to discuss economy. Still, I wasn't introduced. I'll introduce myself very shortly. I'm Edmundas Jakilaitis. I'm not any kind of spokesperson. I'm a professional journalist working for 17 years in television, hosting different kind of talk shows, debates, forums. Also work as in television business as a content creator and producer. We're distributing television formats to the various broadcasters in the region, and not only to the region. The last 2 clients of our company are public broadcasters of China and Malaysia. So that's probably all about me shortly, and let me introduce our panel. Ladies first, Ingrida Šimonytė, member of board of Central Bank Lithuania, former Minister of Finance, and I would say one of the most professional and most dedicated public servants the country ever had. Robertas Dargis, the president of Confederation of Lithuanian Industrialists, also the founder of the leading Lithuanian construction company, EK, development company EK. Also, it's a pleasure to introduce Ilya Laurs, who is the founder of the worldwide leading mobile applications portal, GetJar. That's, I guess, the right description. And of course, one of the most successful businessmen of new generation in Lithuania, and our one of the leading economy experts, Dr. Gitanas Nausėda, chief economist of SEB Bank, Lithuania. So we could, I think we could start the discussion from short statements by our panel, and I would like to address to Mr. Dargis. How could you describe the potential of European Union? How to rise its competitiveness? What would be your thoughts?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For beginning, I will tell a few words about Lithuanian economy, maybe, and after some questions or arise or discussions about European perspective, of course, from Lithuanian point of view. And first of all, as you know, after crisis, we suffered very terribly, and our decreasing of GDP was more than 15% down. And of course, recovering was long, but we can say that today our export is much more than before crisis, and this is the main engine of our economy still today. What is not very good that still investments in technologies are less than was before crisis, and still is less, about 50%, because it's a little bit circumstances about future of Europe, of course, about future of whole world economy is in some doubts, and I think that is now a question for our business community, how to proceed to invest more or to a little bit to wait. And of course, bureaucracy of countries sometimes is also an issue, how to go further. And for beginning, I would tell some words about what we discussed 2 weeks ago in Dublin in Business Europe format meeting in Euro perspectives. And of course, I think 3 main issues what was raised in this meeting was about emission issue and how it deals with industry. Of course, targets of lowering CO emissions is very high, and is one of Europe's, how to say, main points for future, but how it evaluate with industrialization and with our technologies and with our expenses to technologies, of course, is a big question now, and I think that we must discuss about future of that. Second question is what is very important, for my opinion, what shows, especially after crisis time, that having a good and balanced industry in country is, I think, that key issue now for our growing. Especially Lithuania shows that having more than 20% of GDP depends from industry. It's very healthy economy sign, and we especially business community after crisis found new markets, especially well balanced for this moment. I mean, former Soviet Union countries and Europe countries is now, I think, why we are growing still. And as the questions, I think what we discussed and what is important, one of most important, of course, in whole Europe is, of course, unemployment, and especially youth unemployment, and how to deal with this. So from Lithuanian point of view, what I want to mention that we found about 8 questions as what could be discussed in all economy meetings is that before adopting any European Union legislation, we should think how it would or will not improve our competitiveness. Of course, I think that is one of main things, because competitiveness in overall is one of main, I think, issues now for Europe community. Heavy taxation on workforce, especially Lithuanian, is a question. And as you know, Lithuanian, especially workforce tax, is much higher in regions and other countries, but especially in Scandinavian also. And of course, bureaucracy. I think that bureaucracy also is one of main questions is where we must be concentrated. Of course, energy system must be efficient, competitive, and contribute to economic growth, because I think that is, especially for Lithuania, as you know, we are isolated island for energy supply, and this is one of main questions is for Lithuania, and I think that this will be also one of main topics in our presidency. European funds must be more effective, spent must be more effective, because I think that some potential, especially growing, must be much higher if we more accurate spend the funds what we're getting from European community. And when we discuss about youth unemployment, of course, I think that is one of biggest questions is education system, because we see that it's a lack of changes, and especially youth. When we compare, for example, what they are studying in Lithuania, more than 60% they're studying only social sciences, which is not contributing to European regaining in industry. I think that is very important now to have a wider overlook of competitiveness of Europe. Especially education system must contribute to this. Of course, Eastern Partnership, I think, is one of the important things. We must understand that, especially Soviet countries, which was developed, especially by very cheap workforce. I mean, all infrastructure, all energy companies was built, and all infrastructure overall, I mean, railways and roads, was built by cheap slave workforce. And now they need totally renovated. They need new technologies. And I think it's a big challenge for European community to be on time and in place, especially in former Soviet Union, to be and have a good partnership with all this bloc, because I think that we are not alone in this, and especially Asia also shows very big interest in those kind of projects. I think that Europe community must be on time here. So I think that this more or less questions is what is important from Lithuanian industrialist point of view, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dargis, and I would like to address to Gitanas Nausėda. Could you describe the prospects of Euro in the eyes of the future Eurozone member?
As an economist, I see, or I treat current problems of Eurozone from the standpoint of optimal currency zone theory. There are three requirements for optimal currency zone. First of all, free movement of capital, goods, and human resources. The second one is similar economic level of economic development. And the third is coordination, close coordination of economic policy in member countries. Unfortunately, there were very serious violations of the third principle in the past, especially in the last decade. And even some countries, large countries, such like Germany, France, exposed quite loose fiscal discipline, especially in 2004, 2006. And probably it was bad example for the countries of South Europe, which are now in serious trouble. But I think those last years of global financial crisis helped us to draw some very important conclusions. I think first of, or probably most important conclusion was we need much closer coordination of economic policy in Eurozone and in European Union. Already some qualitative and quantitative standards of this coordination were set. So I think that worst for Eurozone, for European Union is left behind. And Lithuania, trying to join Eurozone, probably will join Eurozone, which will be more stable than it used to be 3 or 4 years ago. Yes, of course, we still have a lot of problems in Greece and other countries of Eurozone, but even the example of our neighbors, Estonia, Latvia, those countries, especially Estonia, are treated in the eyes of Lithuanians as very pragmatic. But they did it. They introduced euro in 2011, in the middle of crisis. So I think they understood very well that in the long run, it's very important policy, it's very important step of closer coordination, integration into European Union, and it is good example for us, for Lithuanians. So, right now, we are considering euro introduction in this country. It was already announced that in 2015, Lithuania will be ready to introduce euro. So far, we have some problems with Maastricht criteria, especially with the Maastricht criteria on budget deficit. But I think we have all possibilities and opportunities to manage to reduce the budget deficit up to needed level of 3% of GDP in 2013, in this year. We were slightly above 3.2% of GDP in last year, in 2012. So there are some discussions in Lithuania why we should rush into Eurozone, why we should sacrifice independence of monetary policy in Lithuania. To this last question, I have very clear answer. We already lost monetary policy independence 20 years ago, as Lithuania implemented so-called currency board arrangement and introduced absolutely fixed exchange rate towards US dollar. It was done in 1994. In 2002, we repegged our national currency from US dollar to euro. It was a very important step towards closer financial and currency integration. And then one more second step, also very important, was our participation in exchange rate mechanism 2. So I think that having such monetary policy environment, we cannot talk about the monetary policy independence because everybody will say it's not possible to set independent monetary policy under absolutely fixed exchange rate arrangement. We just are importers of monetary policy decisions made by European Central Bank. So for me, as an economist, it's very clear that we have very clear economic benefits of euro introduction in this country. First of all, we will enjoy lower interest rates, borrowing costs will be lower. By the way, a very good example of Latvia. Before the situation was clear and everybody understood that Latvia will manage to introduce euro in 2014, it happened about in the mid of 2012. The yield on government bonds, 10-year maturity in Latvia, was about 30-40 basic points higher than in Lithuania. After the situation was clear and everybody believed that Latvia will join Eurozone in 2014, the yields on government bonds became 50 basic points lower than in Lithuania. So it's a very concrete example of the benefits of euro introduction. Also, we have unneeded costs on exchange transactions, currency exchange transactions. We as the banks, I am representative of the commercial banks, we earn, of course, those fees on currency exchange, but those fees are quite impressive, about 50-60 million liters every year. So they will be abolished after introduction of euro in Lithuania. And also, I think we will become the part or decision maker in the Eurozone region, because then we will have the seat in European Central Bank, so there will be all possibilities to participate in the formulation and implementation of monetary policy, and not only monetary policy, but also fiscal policy decisions. So I think having such strong political commitment to introduce euro, we will manage to do this in 2015. So if you will visit Lithuania in 2015, you will pay everywhere in euro. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gitanas. And I would like to address to Ingrida Šimonytė. You've been the Minister of the Finance during the highest peak of the crisis in Lithuania and the EU. What lessons did you learn, and what perspectives do you see? Yeah, it should work.
As any blonde, I have problems with technologies. Yes, indeed, it happened that I was asked to become a Minister of Finance in the middle of 2009. That was a pretty bad time for Lithuania. And I'm not a politician by background. I must say I'm a technocrat working in the Ministry of Finance for was 16 years, I think, when I left in the end of 2012. So, and it sometimes happens that when you have dirty job to do, then politicians are looking for somebody who is not in politics to try to handle that. And I must say that in the eyes of the global community, Lithuania has a kind of stigma, or not stigma, the renommee of austerity country. But I actually would doubt that, because I don't know whether it is easy to talk about austerity in the country which had 9% of GDP expenditure above the revenue in 2009, similar levels in 2010. Of course, later, as the economy recovered, deficit started to shrink rather quickly, and this year, European Commission proposed and the Council agreed to abolish the excessive deficit procedure for Lithuania, which was the main goal of the previous government to cope with excessive deficit, and that was successfully done. And from the experience of our country, I would say that, well, the main answers to the problem you have now typically are somewhere in the past. So definitely, what caused the crisis in Lithuania and more generally in Baltic states was two things. One thing was that the growth itself, especially in 2006, 2007, was not sustainable, because it was basically fueled by a very speedy increase of credit by a banking system. And of course, there was no surprise, because the risks were considered minimal, and everybody was thinking that this is a convergence country, a convergence region, so a good place to invest. But to some extent, the volume of the process was excessive. And of course, when all the all the side effects start to show up in high current account deficit, in non-sustainable wage developments, inflation, all of a sudden speculations about possible devaluations, which happened many times before in many places around the world, occurred in 2008 before global crisis, at least before Lehman. I mean, we were supposed to have problems anyway. The question was how bad the problems will be, and after Lehman's, it was understandable that the problems will be very bad, because credit evaporated all of a sudden like this, and there was a Second shock, decline of demand to our exports due to the global situation. That's why we ended in 2009 with an impressive decline of -15. The problem was that before crisis, actually, the conventional methods that are used for measurement of economic cycle, at least in European institutions, were not showing, and that the same most probably was for Spain and for some other countries, were not showing that we are having any overheating in the economy. And people just thought that this is a very speedy convergence and everything is normal. And then in 2009, we realized that this was not true, that the structural position of the government finances was very bad, and actually the government had to undertake all kinds of measures to repair this position in order to regain trust from investors. Because one might talk a lot that austerity is bad, or fiscal consolidation. I would call that that's a more proper name, because I mean austerity or savings is when you save extra of what you earn, but we were still spending much more than we were having in revenues. So I would say that whatever you might call bad, people suffering, and all type of arguments, but once you have a deficit, once you spend more than you earn, then you need somebody to finance it. And if you cannot gain back the confidence of those who are lending money, then there is no big sense in talking that markets are bad, investors are stupid, they don't understand how good we are. I mean, this is all just words which are basically not working. So we were first to hit, far from Iceland, and maybe that was the and we had the short period of this luxury growth. So maybe this is the reason why we managed to kind of get back to decisions quickly, because there was nobody behind us. There was no euro redemption fund or stability mechanism, nothing, and we had to fix it ourselves basically, and so we had to react quickly. And another thing is that of course there are lessons to be learned from the past, because all the Baltic states have suffered nearly the same decline of output in the economy, but the fiscal outcome of this crisis in countries differ. And here, Estonians, the pragmatic ones, are a very clear example that what you have now is the outcome of what you did before. And given the prudent or rational fiscal policy in pre-crisis times, now we see that Estonia managed to get out of the crisis basically without increasing the public debt. Lithuania and Latvia were less lucky. We had quite a substantial increase of public debt. That's why I do not sign up to the word austerity here. And of course, this is kind of the problem, because we all know that the higher the debt is, the more it hampers on future growth, the more it puts the country to the risk of the problems we see in Southern Europe, where any hike of debt servicing costs means just an increase of deficit, and there comes a vicious circle. You cannot get out of it, at least easily. So this is of course a real problem that needed to be minded, and that the previous government took as a priority to stabilize to decrease the deficit to Maastricht criteria and to stabilize the debt, which is now stabilized at 40% of GDP level and is supposed to start decline this year and through the medium period. And of course 2009 was a hard year. Some people said this is a lost country. Some people thought there is an opportunity in this country, and Barclays is one of good examples, who actually came to this country in 2009, which was the worst year for the economy I can imagine. So that depends on how you look at it, and if you look at it in a Chinese way, where they say that crisis, not just crisis, but it's risks and possibilities. And if you look at this way, then of course there were risks, but of course there were also possibilities. And the possibilities for our exports were, and the gains of this internal devaluation and policies undertaken by the government were so high that we now have record high levels of exports, much higher than pre-crisis levels, where there was a clear trend towards non-tradables, because money were easy to get, credit was easy to get, and quick money were easy to earn. Now the situation has changed. Economy has rebalanced. Imbalances in external account and also in fiscal position have smoothed to a large extent. And now I think that we have a quite sustainable position to look into the future. Now, some people sometimes say, what can you say for countries in Eurozone that are having problems? Should they follow your example? I think it's a very simplistic way of saying that everybody should do what Lithuania did, because everybody should cure its own diseases. And if in our case, problems were more cyclical or fiscal rather than structural, in other cases, when we talk about competitiveness issues that are present in labor market, in product market, in services market, then it's not enough just to cut expenditures and increase taxes, especially amid the declining, further declining output. And definitely the cures and the answers more lies in structural decisions rather than in pure fiscal consolidation, which in case of Lithuania were to a large extent the main remedy of the problems that we were facing in 2009. That would be my.
Thank you, Ingrida. I think we'll have opportunities to come later back to those topics. And I would like to address Ilya, whose business is one of the biggest success stories in Lithuania in the last 2 years, or 3 or 4 years. Ilya, what would be your thoughts? How to make full use of the EU's single market opportunity?
Okay, so first of all, good to see you all here. And I would maybe focus a little bit on the micro level as opposed to macro level. Guys are talking around me around those, unemployment and stuff. So I'm a practical guy. I come from a business perspective. And I would highlight 2 issues which are, in my opinion, extremely important for whole of Europe and its competitiveness relative to the rest of the world, which is innovation and entrepreneurship. I think these are 2 very powerful things that Europeans really have to address properly. Because really nowadays we're talking about the economies built on high tech, built on knowledge economy, built on extremely high added value. And although Europeans have a ton of opportunities in that space, apparently there are challenges. So if you look at the high-tech sector, until recently, it actually had been dominated by the Silicon Valley and years companies. So companies like Google, like Facebook, like Yahoo, they all have been coming from Silicon Valley as opposed to European. So apparently there are some challenges here. Why don't we build those kind of companies? On the other hand, if you look at the very recent years, I will mention just a couple of recent years, there is a sign that there is a lot of innovation coming from Europe. So looking at our neighbors, Finnish guys from Finland, it's funny, probably not everybody knows that today the center of gaming, computer gaming, is actually in Finland. So companies like Rovio, companies like Supercell are building businesses where one single mobile game is earning close to $1 billion a year, just on the back of mobile platforms like Android, like iOS, and so on. So we're talking about new markets, new opportunities, which actually are now so big that relative to anything we've been doing before, actually they are changing completely the landscape and the opportunities for whole businesses. I happen to be in mobile application industry, and until recently, until now, actually I still hear a lot of skepticism. It's like, what you can do, small apps, who cares? I will mention just the numbers because we're talking here numbers. I've done a lot of research apparently myself, and I would refer to Juniper, to Forrester, to a lot of our research. If you look at that specific one, a new high-tech, high-end sector industry, this is the one which is going to grow next year to $50 billion globally a year. $50 billion. Just to give you a perspective of that kind of number, if you take the whole of music industry, like all of that, rock stars, label companies, physical, digital distribution, all the CDs, all the USB keys, like everything, it's $25 billion a year. So we're talking about new high-tech phenomena where, look at the music, it's been built by humankind in the last couple hundred years, and we look at mobile apps, like something tiny and simple mobile phone, which just appeared like 5 years ago, and now it's twice as big as the music industry and continues to grow. I will give you some other striking numbers. If you look at mobile applications, this year, they're going to surpass television by the amount of consumer engagement. So we're talking about, again, a new industry just emerging out of nowhere and creating and demanding more attention, more mind share, more engagement from consumers than whole of television, all of that. Like all TV channels, we're famous TV watchers and zippers a day. So guess what? Now we're spending more time with mobile apps than spending with television. And this is just one vertical. This is just mobile apps. We have plenty of them. We have high-tech in clean sector, biotech, laser technologies, banking, and so on. So opportunities are huge, And I think it would be fair to say that for countries like Lithuania, say focusing on all the economies like agriculture, while it's traditional apparently very important, it's not the fastest way to really gain a high share of the new economy, which is again big. So what I wanted to maybe touch a little bit is how do you build a systematic approach to innovation? Because again, innovation is not a product of individual companies. It's a product of the whole ecosystem. So I've been observing different governments, different countries trying to recreate Silicon Valleys. Funny, in America they have a joke that Silicon Valley is the only place on the planet that actually doesn't try to build Silicon Valley. Everybody else does. So you look at Estonians, you look at Irish, you look at Israel, you look at Asian countries like Singapore and so on. Like everybody's trying to recreate the whole ecosystem. And unfortunately, in many cases, we look only for external symptoms of the ecosystem. So you look at projects like Skolkovo. The guys think that if you build high skyscrapers with glass windows and plug it like in the fastest internet, like that's it. Like go innovate. Like stop, there's way more complexity to that. There's like way more angles. And maybe I'll just touch on just a couple of them just to give you a perspective, how complex the whole innovation ecosystem should be, or it is, when it's working properly. So, for example, simple things like liberal labor environment is key. And again, this is something which really we Europeans have to decide what are our priorities. Because innovation actually, if you really go deep, it actually touches even on human values. Europeans, we think that creativity, labor protection, safety are key values that we have. So we're building a society which is built on those values. On the other hand, again, look at the innovation pace in Silicon Valley. Again, building something new is upfront, building something who has never ever tested before. So you really need flexibility and environment in which you can hire 20 people and let them work something, and if it doesn't work, just let them go, because this is the price that you pay for innovation. Again, I'm not advocating for this or that model. What I'm saying is that a lot of, sometimes, our desires are actually incompatible mutually. So when we say, hey, we want to achieve, extremely high labor protection and labor regulation, and so everybody feels protected, everybody has those free holidays, and guaranteed like a month of vacation like in France, or just yesterday learned that Lithuania has actually the longest holidays in the world. Like we don't work 41 days a year, which is just a huge amount. But on the other hand, we also say, hey, we want to innovate as fast as Silicon Valley does, and we want to have those Microsofts and Facebooks and all other companies coming from here. So there is price that you have to pay for that. So regulations, government approach, and is basically one thing which needs to be like properly addressed, because otherwise it's just kills the whole idea from the very beginning. Funding. And this is, again, I'm luckily not a politician, so I can really speak what I really think. And I would say that European, not just Lithuanian, but European approach to funding innovation out of essentially taxpayers' money is fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally wrong. That's my personal opinion. Again, don't really trying to represent some other points of view. But first, I've seen this kind of funding is allocated. And this is terrible. It's like in Soviet Union time. Essentially, it's very formal. Like they have like a spreadsheet. They create a ton of bureaucratic requirements, And free kids out of university that actually would be the best, say, use case for this money, don't have a chance to get those money because regulations are just like way too complex for them. So what's happening instead, and this is actually happening in Lithuania, businesses are built just to absorb the European money available for innovation and grants. So basically you build product just to absorb the money. You know, how stupid is that? Because typically money is the tool to build the product and then to something else. So next apparently is the say quality of and efficiency of using those money, because you know, when a government official is trying to allocate investment into a startup or entrepreneur establishing business, apparently it doesn't really, I mean, that person or that body doesn't really care what happens with the money. If you look at the different model, the private capital model, which is dominating in countries like US, very low limited partnerships, and if you wrongly allocated the money, that's it, period. Your career is gone, done. Like you never ever will work in that kind of area. So the quality of supervision of the money, the quality of issuing the money, say the quality of just putting smart resources into that money is a completely different level. And at the very last, I would say just socially wrong, because basically what happens is that the society in the shape of taxpayers' money consumes and buys all the risks, while the reward is really taken by the entrepreneurs or businesses. So it's just socially wrong. And this is just like second vertical. So funding, compare European approach to American approach, where essentially there's enough private capital to buy all risks. And again, it's way more efficient and it's way more socially correct, because basically what happens is if private capital buys the risk and something happens and the money is lost, it's the private capital that consumes and takes that, as opposed to taxpayers' money. So and maybe again, I could probably do like a lot of those comparisons, but maybe the last one, which is of really big importance apparently, is education. Education. We are talking a lot about the quantity of our education. We say, hey, Lithuanians or Europeans, it doesn't really matter. On average, they have much higher degrees, and the higher education, their share is like way higher than it's in the US and so on. But when you look at the quality of education, again, right now I'm trying to focus on specifically entrepreneur/innovation. So leaving aside, all of our fundamental sciences and other stuff, which I think everything is good there. But specifically on those verticals, there is a lot to be learned yet. I would just share you one shocking fact, which by the way does represent that there is a systematic problem in education. As I was giving a keynote to one of the Lithuanian business universities 3 weeks ago, talking to third to fourth year students, and when giving a keynote, I feel that disconnection. So what I say is not really received, at least based on the reaction of the people in the crowd. So I say, hey, and I was happened to be talking about investments and venture capital and those kind of things. So I say, hey, how many of you actually know the difference between credit and investment? And then guess what? Like 5% of the people raise their hands. 5%. So 400 kids, just a few hands. And then it's like, hey, wow, this is like business school, like 3rd to 4th years. You cannot tell credit from investment. Well, there's something fundamentally wrong there. And based on my personal experience, I spent 6 years studying economics in one of the economic universities in Lithuania, and never ever in my 6 years I was even mentioned the word venture capital. So again, I would dare to say that to entrepreneurship, to innovation, venture capital is as important as banks, with all respect to banks. But this is the instrument really to fund all these new crazy ideas. Never ever, not a single mention, period. So when actually venture capital called me one day, I was completely lost. Even though I had education, or supposed to have education, high education, a degree in economics. So again, those are the things that are happening. And I think, again, summarizing, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is a massive opportunity on the global scale, not just for Lithuania, for Europeans to compete. B, there is a massive potential here. Again, I would dare to say that some high-tech sectors like banking, like mobile technologies, are way more advanced even relative to the US, even relative to Silicon Valley. So there is really capability there. But C, there are still a lot of things to be done on verticals like regulations, like education, like funding, and so on. Because unless we solve that, probably we'll have much less chances to take a cut of this new value created by all this knowledge economy.
Thank you for your statements, and now we can go to questions and answers. I'll just bring the microphone. Please.
Hi, Gabrielle Steinhauser from the Wall Street Journal. I have a question for the two finance experts. There's obviously a lot of debate about banking union and whether countries in non-euro, whether EU countries that don't use the euro should join the banking union, should submit themselves to ECB supervision and potentially a resolution mechanism. What do you think? I mean, what do you think Lithuania should do? And given that a lot of your banks are, for instance, owned by or are part of Swedish banks.
Yeah, I'll try to handle that because the debate on the banking union started when I was a minister, and Lithuania, as other non-Eurozone member states, fight it a lot in order to secure that interests of non-Eurozone member states that potentially would take part in this mechanism would be secured, because you know that under all the statutes of ECB there is all kinds of limitations for non-Eurozone member states to really be taken into account, and although to extent possible I think the compromises have been made. But here I would say that for Lithuania this is less of a dilemma, because well I'm quite sure that Lithuania will join Eurozone in 2015. So there will be basically no need to kind of think whether we should be in or whether we should be out, because we will be in just naturally, because we will be a part of Eurozone. So I don't think there is a real dilemma for Lithuania on this topic, really.
And what about other countries which won't be in a club?
Well, I think every country will decide, and some countries have made it pretty clear that they are not going to be the part of the supervision, and of course they also want their interests to be secured in European institutions like EBA, and they also want single market to be protected, which is a natural argument, because this is what European Union single market is about having same standards for service providers. But well, I don't think we should judge what other countries should do, and we can speak for Lithuania, and I think there will be no dilemma for Lithuania.
Do you think you will actually get the benefits if Sweden doesn't join?
Well, see, there is, of course, a very large extent of cooperation with Riksbank on banking supervision. No surprise, the structure of the market dictates this because the main part of the market are well, operated by Swedish subsidiaries. But I don't think there is any significant kind of conflict in that, because we will have Estonia in banking union, Latvia in banking union, and Lithuania having the same banking structure also in banking union when Lithuania joins Eurozone.
Mr. Nausėda.
For me as a banker, it's not a dramatic issue, because all the time we implement the rules which are stronger. I mean internal rules, prudential rules which are stronger than the external. And this is the reason why during the global financial crisis, Swedish banks or Scandinavian banks have any big problems because of this very restrictive and very conservative behavior, which allowed us to be able during very, very difficult times.
Good morning, Mark Papercore in the Netherlands. This question for the founder of Gedjar. I don't know how to pronounce Mr. Lausar. I was triggered a little bit about what you said about the need of flexibility on the labor market. It's something the European Commission also now already says for years, but it doesn't happen. Look at what happens in France. They get a recommendation that they should maybe change their pension system a little bit, and they say no way. Do you think that this flexibility is something inevitable, so that France is actually fighting a war of the past? Or do you think there are ways to get around this flexibility that maybe member states could have a decent level of protection and still have innovation?
Right. So just a couple comments. One, I think this liberal labor regulations is the price you have to pay for innovation, period. They are mutually exclusive. You can combine them to some extent, but again, if you look specifically at the entrepreneurs and new businesses, you have to have that flexibility. Otherwise, investors do not invest into business and companies just because of the risk factor related to investment in those areas. So when you're building a hotel where your turnover and revenue is predictable down to 5%, apparently you can accept the responsibility relative to hiring 100 people that run in that hotel. When you build a new, like Skype or Facebook business model where you have no clue how it's going to work and you have very limited funding, which is about to end, you cannot accept the responsibility, period. So these are like very, very important things. Second, I think that what really needs to happen is there needs to be defined different types of businesses and different rules needs to be applied to different types. So for example, you cannot regulate an Airbus factory with 10,000 employees or whatever with the same regulations, same rules as you regulate 10 startups running their business out of the hotel dorm, period. Like there have to be different rules. And again, finally, again, I think that there are models, there should be models available that maybe isolate, for example, new businesses, small businesses, young businesses out of everybody else and do create very special conditions for those. So, and there are two dimensions. One is just the regulation itself, because it is a massive overhead. It is still, especially in Lithuania. And I will just share you a couple of illustrations that part of the Soviet Union legacy is, I would say, over excessive regulations of all businesses, including very small ones. Very simple fact. If I want to hire my buddy to write a computer code for me, I have to get what they call the labor safety employer's certificate, where I have to go train, spend like almost a month, full day, just, learning like, how the different viruses work and, how do I protect myself from electricity, etc., etc. Unless I have that, what will happen next day I open my small business is the labor inspector comes and even closes my business based on the, because it's like not theoretically safe, or puts me a heavy penalty. Then when it comes to actually, tax regulations and all so on, the overhead is so massive that actually the day one you start your business, you have to have a full-time, almost full-time accountant just to navigate you through all this, like reports, etc., etc. Be almost a full-time legal advisor, because there are so many regulations regulating how you should put your computers. Again, I know because I have your certificates that you cannot put the computers closer than 1.5 meters next to each other, because the radiation degree of one computer can affect the person sitting at the next computer. But guess what? If Zuckerberg was regulated like that, probably he would not have built his Facebook, period. So again, summarizing is I think it is necessary. You cannot avoid that problem because it goes to the extent that if you talk to any venture capitalist in the world, no kidding, and ask them if they ever going to invest in countries like France, they will say, that's the last thing I'm going to do ever. Because once I hire, period, like I cannot just fire a person for whatever. They have this expression of having the person in the closet. That means just, the person goes to work and does nothing, because it's cheaper just to continue paying the salary than to get rid of the person. Again, I'm not trying to be, say, cynical or whatever. I'm just saying, this is the price you have to innovation. And the way forward for me is you split the companies and businesses in very different types. You define the specific sectors, and you apply different rules for those specific sectors. So that's basically what I would comment.
Thank you. Peter Spiegel from the Financial Times. Sorry. I'm not going to pronounce your name, but from Ms. Simonite, is that right? I just want to ask a bit more about the real economy. Lithuania has been sort of a growth story since 2009 and the crisis. How much of that is a return of foreign direct investment? And I'm just curious to what extent that has driven growth, and if that's changed over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. Got described a rather troubling business environment, but I'm wondering whether foreign companies are investing. But I'm also intrigued by the fact that you said you actually did have attract venture capital. We were quite a bit in Brussels about the over-reliance on bank financing for both SMEs and for entrepreneurs, particularly compared to the United States. I'm just curious about where you got your VC financing. Was it an American firm? Do you see European VC developing? Are there people sniffing around Lithuania? Do they tend to be American firms? Do they tend to be European firms? I'm just curious about who's looking to invest here, and particularly with entrepreneurs and startups?
Okay, so yeah, you're right. We did our first investment in 2007. Venture capital firm was Accel Partners. By many measures, it's #1 VC firm in the world. They've been guys like Facebook. It was almost like an anecdote. Believe it or not, it took 6 months between term sheet and full investor agreement. Majority of the time was actually clarification of tax consequences with the Lithuanian government related to capital investment. So we hired PwC to essentially investigate the whole thing, because simple things like, is there a capital gain or not relative to the event were not clear. Even PwC would not know, so they would write to government. Government would take the full 30 days to respond, and so on and so on. So again, not blaming anybody, because that was the first investment. But again, what you might be curious to know, one of the conditions of investment was that the company has to be flipped to United Kingdom, period. And this is not necessarily because the legal environment in Lithuania is bad. It's unfamiliar. Again, you take investment into a British company, it's a copy and paste template agreements where you can actually just take and then apply, and that works. If you invest into companies like Lithuania, not necessarily because this environment is good or bad, it is different. You have to essentially rebuild the whole framework yourself, and that's expensive. In my case, I paid my lawyer $300,000 just for legal advice relative to just one investment. And again, the big chunk of it, because everything was unclear. Government was just one aspect of that. But again, answering your question, one of the conditions that was essentially declared by Accel was you have to flip the company from Lithuania to United Kingdom. Luckily, because we're all part of the European Union now, it is easily possible. But if you look from venture capital perspective, is they care about returns. You cannot go NASDAQ from Lithuania. Those things never happened. Unlikely, it will happen soon. You cannot do a successful M&A transaction, which typically happens overnight, if you have a company, target company in Lithuania, simply because Microsoft, may be very flexible buying Skype, which is based in Ireland, overnight, because again, you just, take one piece of documentation and put it there. Everything is known, clear, and so on, and you cannot do it from Lithuania. So that was, say, one of the conditions. And again, finally, is because high-tech sector is so dominated by Silicon Valley, say, the flexibility that UK location gives you, because UK law is very compatible with the US law. Essentially, you can, hire people everywhere. VIP protection rights are pretty much the same, and so on and so on. So I would say that from European perspective, running a business in the UK is very compatible to running a business in the US. So it's way easier to do anything you wish later with the company. Now, back on your general VC say environment things. First of all, I would say in last 5 years, I've seen a lot of VC money, venture private money coming into that sector, to the extent that essentially special dedicated funds for Europe, for Eastern Europe, for Baltics, for Lithuania are created. So just the one, which is being discussion, I'm pretty sure that, that Brussels are issuing a 90 million euro fund just for the Baltics, and looking for co-managers. So probabilities are that guys like DFG or some other well-known guys will manage those funds. It's there. So venture capital does see a lot of opportunities in that region. Again, having said that, I would say there are still a lot of limitations. And one of the, say, most painful points for venture capital is specifically labor regulation. I would say, top 10 things, it's #1. So solving that, I would say, will massively help attracting capital inwards or accelerating internal capital. Luckily, again, there is already internal capital. And then the whole thing will be way more efficient around production temporarily. Again, direct deals are not really happening. You have to do, this kind of buffering and satisfy those venture capital conditions.
And Ingrid Shmonite, could you go to the first question?
Yeah, I'll try to. Basically, I think that you know that the main driver of growth during recent 3 years was the rebound of exports. And of course, this is, I would say that mostly due to improved competitive position of our traditional manufacturing services. And on FDI issue, I would say that, of course, in 2008, there was a lot of concern among investors what will happen here. And based on assumption that what will happen in the future is the same as what has happened in the past, most of them were expecting devaluation. It didn't happen, but of course that took some time to to think about to gain the trust back. I must say that before crisis, less attention have been paid to foreign direct investments than should have been, and most probably for the simple reason that there were plenty of money to borrow by a banking system. So foreign direct investment issue was kind of overlooked, unfortunately, and I don't think that enough efforts have been put. And in 2009, when we had this general exercise of trying to explain to financial investors and institutional investors and whatever investors that this country is a country that is going to get back on track, the previous government has put quite a lot of efforts in kind of direct attempts and direct communication with the investors, trying to explain the benefits of coming to Lithuania, investing in Lithuania, and that's how we have Barclays here and some other nice examples of big names coming to Lithuania, basically in the midst of crisis. But well, work is far from being done, and of course, hopefully, and the necessary infrastructure was created. The institution we have for communication with foreign direct investment, I think, investors, I think, is quite effective and putting a lot of efforts and presentation and attracting companies to come here. But you know, we live in the world where everybody is basically trying to do the same thing, because everybody is trying to export their way out of crisis and attract foreign direct investment. So that's quite a tricky job to get new investors coming, because reinvestments of current investors is quite significant, but new investors, coming of new investors is not that easy job at current time.
Mr. Nausėda?
Small remark. It's very popular discussion Lithuanian politics. How big was the impact of the global financial crisis? And there are many complaints that our actions were not adequate to the macroeconomic situation in 2009, but they can give only some facts. The recession in Lithuania was only for 1 year, for 2009. Differently from that, the recession lasted for 3 years, and Estonia, where the recession was for 2 years. And I read now the newest publication of Eurostat, and what I see, Lithuania's GDP per capita in purchasing power standard is 70% of European Union 27 average. Who is behind us? Estonia is behind, only 68%. Latvia is behind. Poland is behind. So it's very interesting, and we complain about the salaries in Lithuania, and if you calculate those salaries in euro terms, you will see that the salaries in Estonia are by 25% higher. Latvia is already above us, slightly, in euro terms, and Lithuania is lagging behind, number 3 in Poland. But now I cannot explain the effect of GDP per capita. Then what we should do? Probably we should recalculate our salaries in purchasing power standards, taking into account the price level in Lithuania. And then we will see a slightly different picture. So sometimes, what I want to stress, sometimes economic policy and impact of economic policy is much more controversial, interesting than it looks from the first time.
Okay, we can go to another questions, please.
Just, sorry, Charles Bremner from the Times of London. A general question. We hear this very positive talk from all the experts, people like you, about the enormous benefits of the European Union and the euro for Lithuania. Yet public opinion does not seem to follow. Talking to more ordinary Lithuanians, there's not a great deal of affection for the European Union. Can you explain the discrepancy? I mean, on two levels. The euro, for a start, there's only a minority of Lithuanians who want to join the euro, it seems.
I don't remember what were the... And probably have some professionals who are not very understand and very popular and after things. But nobody is out. Wow. Topics which are not relevant. So, what is the what are the real contracts? Not so. Because I am not pay and for some old place never left any Portuguese. On the other hand, is how to say dealing show monetary policy. Savage has this any people.
Yeah, currency, it was like the only one stable thing during those 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah, but people do not regard that in order to keep this currency stable, all those unpleasant things that were made in 2008 and 2009 were made actually, because the other option was simply to yeah. So people don't understand what is the foreign exchange risk, and that even with currency board, you still have the foreign exchange risk that can hit you as hard as it hit us in 2008.
That's really bad. And I think 2009. Here of that time, pretty fun. Very. This is quite a because
It's safer to save euros.
money gross, but at that time, euro loans came from kind because they take the deposit. But he quite selected standpoint as regards deposits, fine, but as regards euro loan, people wanted to borrow, but they ignored the cost. They also just simply they the eyes.
So
Yeah, but
maybe the answer is policy of central bank, which had managed for those 20 years to keep politicians out from currency policy.
When you have a currency board, then politicians are naturally out of of policy, and there is no kind of possibility for politicians to ring a central banker and say, hello, could you please do some quantitative easing or cut some interest rate. But coming back to the question, because the previous attempt of 2006, when we were not lucky to introduce euro, we also had maybe half of population supporting But then the major fear of the population was that typical fear that when you have euro, you will have the increase of prices, because everybody knows that coffee, cup, newspaper, and all those small stuff you are buying every day, due to rounding up, tend to become a little bit more expensive, and people tend to think that prices are rising, which is actually not the case. And we had the increase of prices. We had inflation of 12% in 2008 with no euro and whatsoever. So basically, that was the legend then. Now I think this perception has more to do with the problems in Southern Europe, and this and some even politicians and some people who produce their opinion to the public are saying, look, you are going into a sinking boat. You will have to pay a hell of a lot of money to this ESM fund. You had to suffer all this austerity, which something which I do not sign up with. Fiscal consolidation is a better word for me. But still, you went via tax hike, you went via expenditure cuts, and there are some countries in the Southern Europe that are not willing to do so, and you will have to pay money to some fund which is providing the funding for the Southern Europe. And this is the kind of a propaganda which is widely used and quite successfully used, and people buy it. And that, I think, most probably is a major source of this skeptic thinking about the membership in Eurozone, because, as Gitanas rightly mentioned, people do not mind the FX risk, the possibility of the banks to get liquidity from ECB. All that stuff is kind of irrelevant. People do not buy it.
Just on that point, why are you so confident that the boat will not sink, that the southern Europeans will not need bailing out? And a little bit more on France. Do you not worry about France becoming possibly the next big problem?
Well, you know, when problems with Greece started in 2010, we were end of 2009. We were doing nothing but just guessing who will be the next. I mean, you can think of whoever will be the next, and there were many candidates nominated. There are problems, absolutely, and there is lack of willingness to sort out at least part of the major problems, and some of the problems are, as Ilya rightly mentioned, related to labor markets, product markets, and all the stuff which would help Eurozone to be more even and more competitive. But well, I would not sign up to the camp of people who would say that Euro is sinking. That's just my opinion, and you might think that I'm wrong, but still I think that yes, there are problems. But for Lithuania, with its currency peg, with its non-existing monetary policy, with its links to European Union, with its geopolitical interests, to say the last but not the least, membership in Eurozone is a clear benefit.
One follow-up on that, because the story actually you say to defend and to explain the membership of the euro is a very defensive one, and that's actually what I hear in a lot of member states, including my own, the Netherlands. You know, if we don't participate, we will the situation will be worse. The light will switch off, and everything will go down the drain. I mean, it's not a very convincing story, I think. So I mean, I'm happy that Lithuania will join the euro, but I mean, don't you think to persuade the people, you have to come up with a more positive story than simply we don't have any freedom at all, so who cares?
No, I would say very frankly, in a short term, you will not. I would assume you will not see those clear benefits, because, well, I was quite surprised that the yields of Latvian bonds reacted so much to the fact that Latvia is going to join the Eurozone, because I thought that there will be basically, at least in short term, there will be no reaction, and I was surprised that there was this this shrinking of the bond yields, a very clear benefit for the country, and at least for somebody who who knows how to calculate. You can compromise any idea if you want to. I mean, there is no. I'm not saying that we will die if there is no euro, but what we are kind of weighing on one hand is participate in the eurozone or not to participate in the eurozone. And when you weigh both alternatives, then there is, in my eyes, a clear benefit to participate rather than not to participate. And it's not that that I'm saying that we would die if we would not participate in the eurozone.
But sometimes can not explain that buying is not true. Let's remember the example of Estonia. Estonia is positive. And inflation started to go up the second half of 10. Cost of administrative prices, cost of but it was not for introduction of there. Introduction January 7, but it was already there. And then in the eyes of the people, it was high. For the economy, politicians, it's impossible to.
Because of our government.
Yes, it's sometimes impossible to explain it. Not the but I couldn't like it. But longer perspective.
Yeah.
And they show like 30%.
I don't remember the last results, but it was like 40 pro euro and 60. It was something like that.
Some trends, for example, in Latvia are encouraging. One was 30%. 30. Now it's about 30. 30.
Peter Spiegel again with the Financial Times. Can I turn back to fiscal policy? We won't call it austerity, we'll call it fiscal consolidation. When does that end? The numbers the finance minister presented us yesterday, okay, the debt is gone up to, I think, 40% of GDP. All right, big increase since 2008, but compared to the rest of the Eurozone, the rest of the EU, that's pretty good. You're just let out of your excessive deficit procedure, so the deficit itself is close to 3%. Your sort of fiscal numbers look pretty good. Shouldn't the government now start spending again on infrastructure and other things that can help make you grow a little bit faster?
Well, the government has a chance to spend on infrastructure without increasing the deficit, because you know that we get like 7% net inflows from EU funds as a interest-free, non-refundable support. So I think that's 7% of GDP, which is more than enough for any fiscal stimulus you might imagine in any country. So I would say that there is no sense for the government to kind of engage into any Keynesian games. But one thing that government needs to mind, and I think it is minding, because basically the fiscal targets had not changed from previous government. The current government has overtaken the same path towards the medium-term balanced budget. That, given that, well, the calculations show that we are still growing below potential, at least at current juncture, there should not be excessive consolidation. So 1% of GDP of consolidation in the medium term, coming up to balanced budget in 2016, presumably, is a reasonable policy, at least in my eyes. That was something we've proposed to the parliament last year. This is the same that this government has presented in the recent convergence program, and I think that's a prudent strategy. And I don't see any rationale to try and kind of increase or decrease the deficit by less, just because government wants to spend on something, because there are money to spend on those items you were mentioning.
Claudio Perez from Spain. What is the social impact of the crisis here? I mean, for example, in terms of migration, or the social effects of the cuttings in the minimum salary or in pensions?
Yeah, maybe Robertas Dargis could answer.
Yeah, of course, the crisis was a huge one, and we lose a lot of workforce in this case, especially in construction business. We lose 50,000 of workers. Comparably, was 150 in total amount. So it's more than 30% was lose. And of course, migration is one of the most worst things for Lithuania, what I think, because from beginning of independence up till now, we lose close to 800,000 population. Before we were 3.7, and now we are somewhere 2.95, yes. So I think that this, if we think now about economic growth and about future perspective of our economy, of course, demographic situation, I think, is most important thing in this case, because Lithuania, in case of altering of nation, is one of the worst in Europe community, because we become older and older every year due to emigration of young force, which is, as you know, is more flexible, more they not sick. So it's very important for economy. And now what we're discussing with government is the main issue, for my opinion, is now investments in regions, which can make, especially foreign direct investment, which can a little bit make more, how to say, demographic situation better one, because we can't offer, especially in the regions, can't offer workplaces for, especially for youth, and they just finish schools and they migrate to European community, which I think is one of best worst things what can be.
Well, may I also add some remarks to this question, because the Baltic states are being criticized even by some prominent economists that what they did was actually stupid, because the social costs of the policies were very high, and something else should have been done. Now let's consider what could have been done. Well, this country could have devalued the currency in 2008, and then all the people who had borrowed euros, and there are 70% of the loan portfolio in euros in this country, would have suffered a hike in their debt. All the savers in litas and all the revenue receivers in litas would have suffered, of course, the decline in their real income or in their assets. Although nominally they would get the same amount of litas than before. So. And still, even under this scenario, there would have been a need for quite substantial fiscal consolidation. Then, there is basically no way out of the situation that would leave people unsuffering. You cannot find out a way that Martians are suffering and people in the country are not suffering at all anything, because we all know that what happened before crisis was unsustainable, and we had to somehow wind down all those imbalances, and there is nothing but people in the country, so there was only a question how to distribute the burden among the population to the most fair extent which is possible. Because if you have deficit, whatever you say, there needs somebody to give you money to finance that. And if there is nobody to finance your deficit, then you don't have any deficit. And then you make cuts and tax hikes, and try to squeeze your hole in the budget and live under your mean, which is very complicated, and I think next to impossible would be for a country like us to do that in one go in 2009. But definitely there was a need for people to bear some burden, and one way or another it wouldn't be different. And I think that we managed to do it quite smoothly, because we had quite a good debate with employers, trade union, although the coverage of trade unions is not very high in Lithuania, but we still tried to get some social debate, social dialogue, and some compact while we were discussing the measures which we had to adopt. Yes, migration is an issue, but migration was an issue right from the beginning of our membership in European Union, because, well, it's physics. You have the law of whatever it's called, Susitikimas, that if people see more opportunities, and they saw more opportunities in UK than in Spain as well, in Ireland, so they moved to those countries just to get their immediate dreams fulfilled quicker than here in this country. So I don't think, yes, crisis added up to this, especially in some sectors the suffering were very high, like in construction. But well, this is a natural process for a country that has joined the club of countries with higher level of prosperity.
So I will do that a little bit more, because Ingrida, as a former minister, is talking about necessary fiscal measures, what was done, and no doubt it's a very important thing. But what we offered for business environment, to improve business environment, to be more flexible, in that kind of government steps was, I think, not good, or a little bit without attention what was necessary. So why we have had so big immigration also, and why the question was so sensitive for labor force.
Okay, so that was the last answer, I guess, and let's do like this. Let's have a coffee or tea, and you'll have a possibility to give your questions in another 10 or 15 minutes during coffee. Thank you very much. Enjoy your stay in Lietuva. Svarbiausia laiku išeiti reklamą.